So, Chris, from the UNICEF perspective, what is the most powerful tool that you have to influence organizational culture and innovation culture at UNICEF that you are really working on in the present moment to embrace successes and failures? And just, Kaylee, to prep you, when Chris answers the question, I'm just wondering how the SDG Lab is being positioned as that kind of tool in Geneva as a multi-stakeholder influencer for innovation culture. So Chris, if you're still on the line, could you talk to us about just your opinion about the most powerful tool that's being used right now at UNICEF?
Sure. Well, I guess there's a UNICEF perspective, maybe and a Chris perspective, but I think there are two at UNICEF, and it's pretty obvious it's inside and outside. One is that UNICEF is a field-based organization with 88% of our staff and resources in the field. Our country offices are not only the most powerful part of the organizational structure, but also where in the Chris opinion, most of the really important work gets done. Not only from an operational level, but also in defining normative structures that then go out to the whole organization. So one of the two tools that I think is vital is to keep a focus on our countries, which for us is the main organizational unit, and allow them to try to learn, to fail, to succeed, and give them the credit for succeeding and take away some of the stings when they fail. And so that's a big part of the work that our team does. The second tool is the external tool, which is, as I said before, the sort of ability for external voices to be motivating and amplifying factors in our own work. Now, that can be as simple as having Ben, Rob, Joanna, or anybody else come, or you, Sue, when you've done it as well, come and say things from outside person's perspective that we may be saying inside, but it means 10,000 times more when the voice isn't one of our own, isn't like cyan blue. It can also mean getting stories into the right media outlets, into the right influencers, places, and trying to break through what I believe is a huge problem of UNICEF in the innovation space, which is our brand. UNICEF's brand does not, and nor has it ever really screamed innovation or new things or testing out, new ways to really fix the world. And so we have to get through that perception. And so I believe that by using those two tools, the internal machine that we have, that we're so lucky to have, and the external capacity to communicate, we can get to a point where we can really motivate the right parts of the system, the parts of the system that will, as Rob said in his introduction, always crush, the new in favor of an embedded culture.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Kaylee, for those individuals on the call that are less familiar with the SDG Lab in Geneva, can you kind of talk about how that is being used as a tool to influence culture and celebrate success and embrace failure within your specific ecosystem?
Yeah, sure. And I think this kind of builds off Ben's point about the culture. Rob said it best at the beginning, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So if the culture of the entity isn't ready, then maybe it does make more sense to talk about lessons learned. I hope in a path to talking about failure, because I do believe it is important to recognize that failures are inevitable in some senses, and it is important that we're realistic when we approach these very huge kind of challenges. And I think that leads into what the SDG Lab does, because the SDG Lab as a lab has kind of experimentation built into its very DNA. And so I think we can also provide a somewhat safe space for talking about those types of issues, or having collaborations where risk is shared and ownership is also shared. So I think the idea of having spaces or innovation units or labs or whatever they are, where it's more common for failure to occur is certainly positive. And in fact, you see in the private sector frequently where their innovation units or groups of R&D are outside of normal operations in the incremental work, because they are on different time horizons, they have different percentage risk of failure, and they do need different types of support. So I think there's the balance between carving out the right spaces and then creating the culture throughout the organization. And I think it's all kind of a process and journey that happens together. And in Geneva, we're trying to create that space for entities to have a friend to lean on, so to speak, to talk about those types of failures.